everybody. Welcome once again to Rise of the GM, where today we're going to be talking about a bloody bargain, an unlucky cattle driver. But the main topic is, what do you do when your campaign fizzles? Here on Rise of the GM. Adam, we are back.
Yeah.
And it is now October. This year is flying by. And I can't tell you enough how ready I am for cooler temperatures and dry temperatures. We had some cool temperatures that were all rainy last week. And we got all these slimy leaves all over our yard and all over our house. We live in the woods. And so that was kind of depressing. But now that it's starting to dry out, it still might be depressing because we got to go out and rake tons and tons of leaves between now and December. It's just going to continue, but still happy. I enjoy that.
Yeah, sort of for sure.
Because I can go out and listen to things like podcasts like Rise of the GM. What?
Yeah. It's still definitely that time where you have a sweatshirt on in the morning, and then at 2 in the afternoon, you're dying of heat, but it's beautiful. Yeah.
Yep.
It's good.
That's my favorite. When you have to layer and unlayer all day long. Well, I'm not ready for it to get dead cold yet because it seems like it's too easy to be all hot or all cold, and those little mid temperatures fly by so fast. So.
Yeah, we're for us in Illinois, Indiana. I feel like you get a week of good fall.
Yeah.
So hopefully, there's more. I was always hoping, please let there be 3 weeks of good fall. So.
Yes. So we're looking forward to it. We got one this week. I feel like it's been pretty good. It's getting up to 78 or something. So that's a little warmer than I like for a good fall. I like those 60s, low 70s. That's the beauty right there. So anyway, we're here. Yeah, we're in that weather, and we're ready to talk today about some what happens when your campaign fizzles. What happens when it doesn't go 20 levels and end on a beautiful, epic high note? What do you do? What causes it? What tips do we have? We're going to talk about all that and more. But as always, we start with an encounter. Yeah. And this week, I think Adam is reading our encounter, and it is a good one. So Adam, why don't you take us on that? We'll talk about how we might drop this into a campaign and what we might do with it.
Yeah, for sure. Again, this is we're working out of Eureka. If you're new to the podcast, jumping in here, there's a book by Gnome Stew called Eureka that we are pulling these from and using them as prompts. And this one's called Orcs in the Dragon's Den. It goes like this: a half-orc stumbles into the PC's camp in the middle of the night, gravely wounded, and begs for their aid. In exchange for healing, he offers them a golden opportunity to destroy what remains of his tribe, including their chieftain, a vicious killer responsible for numerous recent attacks in the area. He explains that the tribe, which has never accepted him, treating him as the lowest of the low because of his mixed blood, has just fought a dragon, evicting it from its lair at the price of many, many orcish lives. They took over the lair, but the tribe has been decimated, and their chieftain is seriously injured. If the PCs strike while the orcs are licking their wounds, they can kill the chieftain and claim the dragon's hoard. To convince them of his sincerity, the half-orc produces a handful of dragon scales covered in fresh dragon blood. The half-orc warns the PCs about their first obstacle, scouts on nearby hilltops and around the mouth of the lair, but is unaware of the two other impediments to reaching the orcish chieftain: a rival dragon who wants to take the lair for himself, but is too young to claim it alone, and the destabilizing effect that the battle with the dragon had on the lair's actual structure. The first encounter is with the scouts, who must be eliminated before they can sound the alarm. They are spread out, with every scout's location in view at least 2 others, and they're adept at their craft. The PCs will need to remove them from the picture quickly, quietly, and without alerting any of their fellows. Entering the lair complex is the second encounter. While there are a few defenders, stealth is still important. Observant PCs may notice that the caverns seem unstable. They're weakened by blasts of the dragon's breath, and they can take advantage of this to cause a cave-in, provided they don't mind missing out on the treasure. In the third encounter, the PCs face the chieftain. The battle should be challenging, as the tribe's 2 war shamans are uninjured and ready for trouble, but not unsurmountable. Midway through the battle, the cavern complex will begin to crumble, raising 2 possibilities. straining the orcs inside could eliminate them, but striking a bargain with the chieftain might allow the PCs to acquire some of the treasure in exchange for helping the orcs escape. This is Orcs in the Dragon Den.
Okay. Yeah. There are some things I like about this, and there are some things that I'm like, Okay, so first, they bring up this idea of like one of the things they don't know about is a rival dragon, but then they never talk about like what you would do with that. I was like, kept waiting.
Yeah.
What's that? But what I do like about this is the fact that it has a wide range of things that you can do as the GM. So your party is not just fight, right? Mm-hmm. So you start off with this guy comes in and there's a social encounter of some sort because, orc comes into your camp in the middle of the night. That's not just like, oh yeah, come on in and talk to us. Tell us your story. Right. So there has to be like, how do you not kill him right away? Okay, so you got to set that up. But then like, do you believe him? Right. He's produced this dragon scales and blood, but like, is there a trickery way you could do that?
Because
if that is even like accepted, then it's like, okay, this guy is basically betraying his own people. What's to keep him from betraying us?
Right.
Can we really trust a guy who's like, oh yeah, well they were all mean to me, so here, go kill them all.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you just met us. Would you backstab us as well? And if so, maybe that's where that baby rival dragon comes in. Maybe he's got another third deal going on. But then once they get to a place where they either decide to do, hopefully they would decide to do this if you've set this as your encounter, but don't count on it because maybe they won't. But when they get to that place, then I like the idea that the first thing you have to do is you've got these like scouts on hills, all within sight of, at least two others. And so there has to be a stealth, probably a split up. How do you do this? So there's a problem solving thing. There's some stealthy stuff going on. So we had a social encounter to start. We got problem solving in here. We got stealth, and then they go in, and the two battle shamans are fresh. The other people might not be. So there's going to be some melee combat, but there's also going to be some magic. And how do you fight against that? And so you get that flavor in this campaign or in this encounter, and then. And before that, there's even a choice. You see stuff's crumbling, and they could make the choice to just collapse the whole thing and call it done. But knowing PCs, they love their dragon hoard treasure, and so they have to make that decision. And secondly, once they have this battle, somewhere in the middle, you get to somehow spring the idea that they might be willing to strike a bargain to get out if you split the stuff with them. And then so does the greed come back strong enough that you're like, yeah, okay, fine, we'll let you go. And then what's going to happen to that dude who like gave you all the information? Or do they try to kill him and then try to get it and run? What's that going to look like in the end? And so there's a lot of room for you to kind of decide what happens if the place starts to collapse and no agreement's been made, that sort of thing. You can put it on a timer. So what I like about this is the varied number of things. It's not just like, here's a scenario, combat. There's social encounter, there's stealth, there's decision-making as far as loot or combat. There's combat. It's the whole business.
Yeah. The option for strategy, like how are we gonna do this? And I like all those things you're talking about. I also was perturbed at the lack of a dragon being talked about. It's like
why?
I think like if they go the route that this is taking them, and they're in this fight with the chieftain and the two shamans and maybe a few other stragglers, kind of thing. Like I feel like round 2, more scouts rush in saying, dragon, there's another dragon coming down the hallway. You're pinched, and the ceiling's falling in on you. Like that gets kind of crazy, and that pushes that urgency of like, maybe we need to make a deal right now,
And even if you make a deal, how do you get all the loot out with the dragon coming after you?
I think about and this would not, I don't think this is the kind of dragon situation, but like the D&D movie dragon situation where they're just like running, like, let's get away from this thing. It's like crushing everything in its path. Like I wonder, the fat dragon, which I highly appreciated. But that kind of idea of like, there's so much just chaos and stuff. I think you could pull some ideas as this little dragon comes, smashing through, trying to take a new horde.
And was that where they found the staff of Hither and hither and thither or whatever.
He had that before. I don't know where it came from, but he had it because that's how they got across the bridge after it all fell in.
Oh yeah.
That's like I don't remember where. Maybe it was there too, but he had it
They
before
found
they
it
crossed the
early.
bridge.
Yeah.
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 I like this, and I think more and more as we look at these encounters, a thing that's coming up for me a lot is like even if I like look at these like pre-made things or anywhere, pre-made encounter from somewhere else that we found, like I really like the idea of looking at the segments of it, and like you kind of laid those out there, and it's a good way like if we're creating our own to template those things where it's like okay, like not every encounter has to have every segment of a element that could possibly be in it, but thinking about, is it more than just like I'm going to stand here and just slash a sword until they're dead, kind of thing, but are
Right.
there moments of strategy, are there moments of sneaking or diplomacy, and how can that all be played in there? So I do like that too, and I love the idea of the third party. Like that was I think why it bothered me that the dragon wasn't involved, is
Right.
because I love that third party, the third player, in there. It's like, okay, we thought this was us versus them, but now there's this other piece that is a wild card. Are they with us? Are they against us? Are they against us both? Could we bring them to our side? And again, you can't like push that every single time, but I think that's a fun, it's like the other adventuring party when you're trying to do something. It's like they're in here and maybe they're kind of along parallel with you, but there's a tension there too, because it's like, when are they gonna turn on us, in the midst of
And it
that?
may
So
not even be like a fight this guy first, fight the dragon
yeah,
next. It
right.
could be that like you decide, hey, the dragon's wanting to take this over, but can't without help. We're help if they make it worth our while by
Right.
giving us a relic each from the dragon horde and they get to keep the rest or
Yeah.
something,
Right.
And so that it may turn into something like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
that third party throws a
Mhm.
different spin on things.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. And in the same way, like the environmental stuff is really cool. And that's like well worth thinking about when you're making your own encounters of like, how would this actually affect, if there are these masses of magic being thrown around inside this place, and there's, uh, people swinging warhammers crazily and monsters charging through things. It's like, it's not. I think when I look at the map, sometimes I'm just thinking very statically, and it's like that you guys had a fight in the library the other day, and I'm thinking, if somebody drops a fireball right now, that has to like affect. These books are not all like suddenly fireproof just because it's part of my map, kind of thing. Like it needs to play a
Yeah.
role. And I think like paying attention to that stuff of like what would change in the environment if a battle was literally happening in here, can make things interesting too with that. And just the choice. I liked the choice of this too, of there are options. It's not just A to B and then we're done. It's where can we go? So I'm a fan of it, but I did wish that they give a little bit more with the dragon that they dangled out there.
But as a GM, know that when
Gets
you
it,
read an
gets it.
encounter and there's something you wish was there,
Hmm.
you can put it there because you
Absolutely.
have that freedom. So
Yeah.
there's a good encounter starter, and hopefully that's something that might, again, like Adam was saying, even if you don't use that one, maybe you could template to be like, okay, how
Mhm.
in my encounter that I'm building can I get some stealth stuff? How can I get some role
Yeah.
playing and social encounter stuff? How can I get some combat? How can I get some choices?
Hmm.
These things that are elements, how can I throw them in there? So
Yeah. Yeah.
very good.
For
All
sure.
right. Well, we're going to talk today about the idea that we've talked on here several times about, oh yeah, I ran a campaign once that went to level 20 and ended this way.
Yeah.
Did
Right.
one that went to level 20 and ended this way. What do you do though when a campaign does not go to level 20? When a campaign fizzles out somewhere?
Mhm.
I actually was looking this week as knew we were going to be talking about this. D&D Beyond actually published some statistics. And I don't know how recent they are, but according to D&D Beyond, most campaigns that people run on D&D Beyond fizzle before level 5 or right after level 5.
Hmm.
So as soon as people hit level 5, that's about as far as most get. And less than 15% of all campaigns that happen on D&D Beyond get to level 10. So if you've gotten past level 10, you're in the 15% that have kept from fizzling out that early. A lot of games fizzle out early,
Wow.
at least on D&D Beyond. And now that's not taking into account all the ones that happen just at the table, who don't use D&D Beyond. But I have to imagine it's similar. And so maybe you as a GM or you as a player have been involved in campaigns and it seems like they're going to be exciting, but then they just kind of die. And there's reasons for that. We want to talk about what are some of those reasons that cause that. What are some of the things that you can do to kind of keep that from happening, to maybe give your campaign a chance to get to that beautiful climactic, end of story that everybody tells stories about for years and years to come.
Yeah, for sure. When I'm thinking about like a fizzled campaign, like just like by kind of my definition here, I'm thinking about campaigns that have untimely ends, kind of thing. Like, and that can be from a lot of different reasons, but I think sometimes maybe there's an expectation of like, this is where I think it's going to go, but it could have an end that is good and does have like completion and satisfaction to it, even though it's not
you're
like
only at level 7 or 11 or something.
Absolutely.
Like this is the close. Those characters could continue on sometime maybe, but this campaign is it's good. It's landed.
It wraps and we feel good about it, kind of thing. And we're not calling that fizzled, by any means. But it's like the untimely end of just different things that happen. And I think it's like there's usually a sense, I think, of I wish that went a different way in this kind of realm. But I was thinking about reasons campaigns die, and I'd love Matthew.
Let's start there. Let's start with what are some reasons that you've seen campaigns fizzle.
Yeah,
and we'll just kind of list as many as we can think of here, and then go from there.
I think a big one that's maybe I don't want to make like really hard line statements, but I think like one of the biggest by far is just like GM demotivation. The GM runs out of gusto, kind of thing, and just never wants to pick it back up or just like burns out completely.
So you see this in a couple different ways. There's the GM who like runs out of creativity, demotivates, and says, you know what, I'm done with this. Oh, you guys, everybody roll a D20. Oh, you all were like burned up in an explosion. Game's over.
Right.
That's a very, very unsatisfying ending because everybody feels like I didn't have a choice. We were all going to, in your mind, we were all going to die no matter what.
Right.
Then there's the kind of GM that I've been accused maybe of being the one who's like, I'm going to start this back up. I need a break. And then that break just lengthens and lengthens. People like, are we ever going back to the Dormant Mind campaign? Which right now has been on hiatus for a long time. I do intend to get back to it because I don't want it to be a fizzle. But here's the thing. Depending on how long that goes, motivation can be lost by either the players or the GM or both the longer you get from it. And so, that's definitely one. That demotivation.
Running out.
Creator burnout.
And sometimes, it's just like I've experienced the, it's like demotivation and we walk away and then never talk about it again. And it's like, like that's kind of a thing, which that's the thing. I don't think we're ever going to let you off the hook with Dormant Mind. So,
well, the good thing is I still, even though like for everybody out there, there are certain times of the year where I have to create every week for my job stuff.
Yeah.
And so like adding another creative thing on top is just, my brain runs out. And so like I end up taking these like breaks, but I haven't lost the spark of that one or the excitement for where it can go and who my players are. So that's at least good. Because my players still are excited. I'm still excited. So hopefully that's not one that's going to fizzle.
Yeah. I think like you mentioned players a couple times, and another like reason campaigns die, is like availability. That could be players, that could be GM. I think that's different from the motivation thing, but just like, it could be as much as everybody moves away, and like, I think some things where I actually felt really good about the last campaign for me that actually finished, kind of thing. Not the one we're in now, but the one prior to that, impending doom. But that one was hustled a little forward because of people moving. It's like our group was kind of splitting up at that point, and we weren't as like tech savvy, and the world was not as tech savvy, as far as gaming at that
This was
time.
pre-pandemic.
Yeah, right. So, it kind of felt like, oh, this needs to be done. But that could have been like if I and we, like we kind of worked together to like work in this go to wrap up well. That was a group project there. If we hadn't done that, then it could have just been like, well, see y'all later, and I guess we're just hanging out here. So sometimes it's player and GM availability.
So on that note,
Mhm.
you mentioned kind of two little areas of that same one. First is people move away or become unavailable.
Mhm.
The party break, the piece, the gathering of your party
Right.
breaks
Yeah.
up kind
Yeah.
of forever
Yeah. Yeah.
in a sense. And so, uh, first of all, you talked about one way that we've dealt with that, and that is we work together as a group to find a way that this can wrap in a satisfying
Right.
way
Yeah.
in the time we have left. There's another way, much, much less frequent, and that was we were also in the middle of, surprise, surprise, the Dormant Mine campaign at that time. And that group had gotten to a certain point, and we
Oh,
realized
yeah. Yeah.
everybody's leaving, but I wasn't done telling the story.
Yeah.
And so Adam and I were in that original part. And we're like, you know what? Maybe there's some other people who want to play.
Yeah.
And we
Right.
brought in these other people. They became their own party. They started in the world
Yep.
completely separate from that first party. Adam
Yeah.
began a new character,
Mhm.
and then those storylines were running concurrently until we came to the place where that first party had gotten to, and then they continued the campaign. So this is
Yeah.
a rare case where the campaign outlasted all the
Yeah.
players. That usually is not the way it works.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that is the way it can. So
Yeah.
that's the first way, is you have like kind of a permanent breakup of the people who were involved for
Right.
whatever
Right.
reason. Somebody, gets injured or ill and they can no longer come. Somebody
Mhm.
moves away, like we had, several people move away at that
Right.
time,
Yeah.
whatever those reasons are. The other kind of part of that is, I think when you have too many pauses and cancels in a campaign,
Yeah.
and
Right.
we're saying this kind of at a weird time because we are canceling tonight our normal
Yeah.
game because we have several people who have things going on. Well, that's fine,
Right.
because
Yeah.
I do think if you're inflexible and people feel
Mhm.
like they can never miss, then they start wanting to pull away because they're like, if I miss, everybody gets really angry at me, and
Mm.
there's no flexibility. So you have to have flexibility.
Yeah. For sure.
So like somebody's like, man, I've got parent teacher conferences this week. I can't make it.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Do we have a majority? Can go on and like your character get filled
Mhm.
in? Okay. Now two people are gone. Let's have these three go on a little side. They're going to
Yeah.
continue on. Or three people are gone. We still have two here. Let's do a little side mission that wasn't part of the main campaign.
Yeah.
And then or this is a day we have to cancel, but we're
Right.
flexible enough to do that. That's all
Yeah.
fine.
Mhm.
But watch out, because it's typically for us in the summertime when
Mhm.
you think we would have more free time. Actually, everybody's traveling, going to conferences, going on vacations, going to parents, whatever it is.
Mhm.
And we end up having a lot of, I can't do it this week, can't do it this week. It's a lot easier for a campaign to drop and fizzle if you're in the midst of something that cancels too often,
Yeah.
too many people gone too often, without just kind of recognizing that and saying, you know what, we're going to take a break from here to
Yeah.
here. Is
Right.
everybody going to be more available starting here? We're going to jump back in.
Yeah.
Kind of setting those parameters. If you just kind of keep canceling every week and everybody checks in every week and like, are we playing? No, we're not
Yeah.
playing
Yeah.
this week. Okay, what about this next week? Are we playing? No, we're not playing it. And pretty soon, the
Yeah.
fizzle.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like a lot of times we're thinking in terms of an off season. It's like, if we can play, that's icing on the cake, but otherwise, like, yeah. So, that's good. Another reason, I kind of think of is like unmet expectations, and I think like this, we keep talking about this. It's so important of like that session zero, and like having those conversations outside of game time about like, what is this actually about, and what are we looking for, because like we have like Matthew was saying, we have a like a steady group that's long term. So we kind of know what's going on and why we're showing up every week, kind of thing. But I think at the start of a campaign, it's always good to like express the expectation of like, if I'm up to run another thing, my first question always is like, one, do you guys want to play something? Two, what genre, like
What
what
do you want to
RPG are we
play?
playing? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's like, and if people are like really wanting, you know, something, they want something that's actually episodic and like pretty low key, and then I show up and I'm trying to like cram everybody into this like epic master like plan thing that is all just railroading them straight through it when they were just kind of wanting to like explore. um then there's going to be some of those discussions, and if I'm just unwilling to move on that, that could be an expectation thing that just kind of kills it a little bit, kind of thing.
Right. Or the GM tries to run this real dark and gritty thing that's
Mhm.
like, super heavy, but everybody's in a mood to like wisecrack all the time and
Right,
have
yeah,
lighthearted,
yeah,
goofiness. Uh, those different expectations can cause
absolutely.
people to like be like, this is just no fun. I'm tired of
Yeah,
this.
yeah, it's not what you're expecting. Kind of it's similar, but like I also had down like lack of focus, or like just a campaign being what it's like supposed to be. I think I'm kind of getting into. I may wait a little bit to like really get into that, but I've experienced that as the GM who had a fizzled campaign, where like my focus was not like I didn't have one. It's like I kind of started and then I'm like, and then we just never played again, kind of thing. And that's happened to me. So I think like that like there's a focus kind of issue that can happen sometimes if we just don't know where we're actually taking people. Even
Mhm.
if it's like I want them all to be like creating the story, but if I have no point of reference about like where this could go, then that can kind of cause a fizzle also. I don't know, do you have things that you're thinking of in that realm?
Yeah. So I think uh, in addition to what you talked about, I think here's a couple more.
Yeah.
One, when players feel completely railroaded, this can
Yeah,
lead
right.
to a fizzle of a campaign. So, as a GM, sometimes you have a story that you want to tell and you know where you want it to go. It's kind of the opposite of what you were just saying. You know where you want it to go so bad that
Yeah.
you're going to make sure your characters choose the things you want. And
Right,
they're
right.
going to go into this temple because you want them to fight the thing in the temple. And they're not going to get out until they do. And then when they
Mhm.
get out of there, it's going to send them directly to this place because that's part of your story. And you can like railroad people so much that
Right.
they begin to feel no enthusiasm because they feel like they have no agency. They feel like
Mhm.
they have no
Yeah.
choices that really matter. It's like, okay, we're going to do whatever the GM wants us to do, and we're going to win when he wants us to win, and we're going to lose when he wants us to lose. And if he
Mhm.
doesn't want us to lose, somehow, hand of God, we're going to win. And if this guy's just supposed to be such a big bad guy, there's nothing we can do to beat him.
Mhm.
He's gonna lay it down on us regardless.
Yeah.
So you start feeling a lack of motivation to even play or to role play or to anything
Right.
because it just you feel completely railroaded, and that
Mm.
will lead to a fizzled campaign almost every time. So as a GM, know that like have a goal, but also be willing to explore and build a story that goes places you didn't expect. Let your
Mhm.
characters make choices, and then at that point, like reevaluate and write, okay, they went this way. What can happen? And how can maybe it eventually get them back here? But we're going to totally go a path I wasn't expecting, that I
Yeah,
didn't
right, right,
plan.
right.
They made a choice I didn't anticipate, but what can I do with that there? That's part of the
Yeah,
being able to develop that as a GM is a
for sure.
huge, huge skill that will make your campaigns go further and get to
Yeah, yeah,
completion.
absolutely. Yeah,
Right.
Rob mentioned have to make sure a linear story doesn't turn into a railroad. Yeah, and I think that is that like line of having a point looking forward, but also not forcing it, kind of thing. Yeah,
Yeah. So
that's
here's
good.
another one I had. This one we've kind of talked about a little bit in the past, this idea that we want everybody to write a backstory, right? And to have their goals. We just talked last time about setting goals and hopes and stuff like that. And that's all great for
Mhm.
people to have goals and to have a backstory. But what can happen if we're not careful, and this will lead to a fizzle,
Mm.
is if everybody has their own storyline that they're interested in only, but they have no group story. They have
Right,
no
right, right.
group goal. They have
Yeah.
no group thing. And all they're wanting to do every time is this guy's like, I'm going to go into a tavern because I want to drink and I want to like hang out with the other orcs and I want to do this and that. And this person's like, I'm going to slip off because I'm trying to be sneaky and I'm not going to tell anybody where I'm going because I'm trying to do this thing that I'm trying to do where I get a dagger in the underground somewhere. And this guy's like, oh, I'm like I care about the magician's college and I want to get in there because but
Right.
like they're all wanting to play their own separate stories, but there's no group
Yeah,
cohesion
yeah, yeah. The
goal.
cohesion of it.
That's going to lead pretty quickly to people like getting tired of like the times when they're not doing their own
Right,
thing,
right.
and that can be dangerous. So I think it's great to have group goals. Individual goals,
Mm.
individual like motivations.
Yeah.
But I think as a GM, the best thing you can do, I say this all the time, the best, like there's 100 best things you can do. But one of the 100 best things you can do is to take those goals and somehow weave the stories together, right? So if this guy's
Right,
wanting to
right.
find that special dagger in the underground, but this guy's like really wanting to learn magic, and he goes over here, and while he's in the magic college, he spots this like dagger up on
Mm.
display in one of the mage's offices, and this guy who over here just wants to drink with everybody, he gets you have to weave those stories
Right, right.
together so
Yeah.
that everybody feels like I'm accomplishing my thing, but
Mm.
at the same time, and in all of that, feel free to sprinkle in the stuff you're trying to get them to. That is like the big thing you're
Right, yeah,
heading
yeah,
toward.
for sure.
Weave that in and weave the things they're searching for as part of like, this is how you get to what I'm trying to get you to go to.
Yeah.
So it makes it much more enjoyable for everybody and less likely to fizzle if you don't give everybody just their own
Right,
story.
right.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. That's good.
I have one more
Yeah,
I
go for
think
it.
I had on my list here, and that is pacing.
Mm.
You have to be careful about pacing if you want to be keeping it from fizzling. Then what you have to do is not too slow. Right? If you're there and you get to, okay, this is the story. You seem to do a lot of things, but like it doesn't seem to be going anywhere, and people are
Mhm.
like really like, what is this all about anyway? Unless they're all in the mood for just episodic fights. It's like all we want to do is go from a fight to a fight to a fight. That's
Yeah.
fine. But like if they're hoping for a story at all, and all you're doing is it's taking too long to see how anything connects, and it just feels like
Mm.
you're fighting random people,
Yeah.
that's going to throw them.
Right.
Secondly, in combat pacing,
Mhm.
we've talked about this before. People need this is part of the players, and you as the GM have to kind of help lead this. But when a player gets to their turn and they don't know what they're going to do, and they start looking over
Yeah.
their spell list that's got 45 spells on it and reading each one, and you're like, hey, you need to. Yeah, do it in a way that's tactful, but like
Yeah.
basically, hey, you're going to be going here next.
Yeah.
Make sure you know what you're going to do, and then you're after that. But you keep that
Yeah, yeah.
pacing so that it is fast enough. The other thing, as far as pacing,
Mm.
you get to a break between, and you basically throw it out to them. What do you guys do now? And it turns into like a 2-hour shopping campaign where
Yeah.
everybody's like, "Oh, I'm going to go check out the blacksmith. I want to go check out the potion shop. Now I need to go check out a different shop that to see if they have what." And it's basically
Yeah, yeah.
you spend your whole night with people just basically shopping.
Mhm.
That can get really. Even though they're the ones leading it,
Right.
you as the GM have to kind of move that stuff along because that will lead to a boredom of sorts, especially for the
Yeah, yeah,
people
for
who
sure.
aren't getting what they want,
Right.
aren't shopping. They're just wanting, let too long of people just doing, that thing you throw
Right.
that, what do you want to do now? And they're all
Mhm.
just like doing like crazy little random things. Sometimes that can lead to a fizzle.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. This is like really random, but within that thing, I'm almost wondering, I was thinking about like so in that case, it's like when do I uh actually play out like an NPC? Because I think that is fun. Like it's fun to have the quirky shopkeeper, or like these NPCs that we've like went through in random places like that. And like when do I just say, okay, so you're going to buy healing potions? Okay, cool. Yeah, there's 4 available at 100 gold pieces each. Do you want to do those? It's like, when do those happen? Then I'm off topic here, but like, and I'm wondering if like the litmus or the filter, I guess, for that is like, if the group's together or the majority of them together, if maybe that like gets more role play versus like if they all split in different directions to go buy caltrops over here and potions over here and perfume guild over here, it's like, then we need to like, okay, let's do that a little more meta and then bring you back together. I don't know. I'm spitballing in this moment, but I'm wondering if like that pacing thing is helpful for getting them back in as a group together.
Well, when it comes to like role playing NPCs,
Mm-hmm.
I try to like limit it, not knock it out. I don't go completely meta, but I try to limit it unless I feel like it is doing one of a couple things, either setting up a quest or a goal or a leg of the story,
Mm-hmm.
or being the big resolve of that. If it's just like in the middle things, I'll still do it because it gives the world roundedness, but you have to be careful as a GM, especially if you're somebody like me, but anybody really, to not just, I love playing this cranky dwarf, so I'm just going to like really, well, we got some caltrops, but you guys are going to have to pay double for them. Oh, well, we don't want that. What else do you have? Well, let's see. I got horseshoes and I just like talking this way so much that I'm just going to like go on to very irrelevant stuff for a long, long time. That can get too long.
Yeah.
And so I try not to get I love this character so much. And so I spend a million, minutes on it, unless it's accomplishing something, like setting something up, resolving something. I do think the resolutions of things are good times to have good role playing. And I do think, obviously, if it's a social encounter, there's going to be role playing in that, but there's a goal involved in that, right? It's not just shopping. Not that you can never go shopping, because sometimes that is a fun thing for people, but it's also something they can kind of plan when they're not sitting at the table as well.
Yeah. If I've been in some of those situations for sure, and it's like, if there's not a hook or like the world gets bigger because of this, then there's not a lot of reason. You just kind of sit there and have a conversation just for the sake of it, and everyone else is just like falling asleep, kind of thing. So I get that
now,
for sure.
If you're going to be the shopkeeper and in the midst of this, you just lay something on the counter that ends up being like this amazing thing, changes their world, that's different, right? Because that's not just like cow trips or horseshoes.
Yeah.
It's like it's furthering the story.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, for sure. So like going back into this, we kind of were talking some like theory and stuff of this, but like, if we're looking at actual times we've had fizzles, I was thinking about this weekend. There was the Tale of Arendir that I had, and like that, this one that I was kind of mentioning earlier, my lack of focus, I think, was the biggest downfall to it. Because I honestly, like, was trying to think back at it. It's been a while. It's been a bit, and trying to think about that. But I feel like I remember trying to go into this a little more or less like, here's this major arc that's happening, kind of thing, and trying to leave it more open. And I think realizing like there does need to be some sort of purposeful hooks given to people, even if it's like, I'm going to scatter 4 of them, and whatever of them they grab onto, then we'll go with that kind of thing for a time. But I mean, that was the one. Some of you who listen to this were involved in that one too. But the very last thing that happened was the party went across the sea in a boat, and they showed up in a city, and this was the sign that I had no focus at all. The only thing that I had going on in the city that was unique was there were dwarves on the docks carrying around stone boxes. That's all I could come up with. And then we like stopped playing that was the end of the night, and we never played again.
That was the end of the campaign.
That's free. Those dwarves. And then that's where Matthew started hating dwarves. But
that was the time. No.
But it was like one of those things where I'm like, oh, I don't know. There's dwarves on the dock with stone boxes made of stone. Super interesting. And like, I look back at the end of that at least, and I'm like, there was a lack of focus there, but like, regardless of that, I wasn't seeing that in the moment. And, I think like if you're in a place where you've had that or that happens to you, it's, there's like, I think there's some emotion in that. I mean, when we create things, we put ourselves into stuff. It's like hard to be like, oh, everybody hates me, I guess, because we're not playing this game anymore, which isn't true. That hopefully is not true. But hopefully, but that comes up, and I think like, it's hard to deal with the killing of something that you've put like creative energies into sometimes, regardless of how well you like talk it out. And I think sometimes it's like, frustration comes out of that when you're like, oh, like what did I do wrong, in this? And I don't know, like looking at stuff for you, Matthew, like when you're, like I know at least one that wasn't finished that I can think of, but like what was kind of in your brain as you got
Which
to
one
the
are
end
you
of that?
thinking of? The nine moons.
Nine moons, yeah, 9 moons.
Yeah. So I think that one was a case of. So as I look through these, there was one more I forgot to add, and I think I'll throw that in real quick.
Okay.
I think one reason that some campaigns fizzle is because people begin to hate their characters. They feel like this is dumb.
That's
I
true.
don't like this character anyway. I'm tired of it. And then they check out and they're sitting at the table on their phone, or they're just like waiting for it to be over. And pretty soon it fizzles. So when I look at campaigns, all of these reasons we gave, I try to categorize. Have I been involved in or run a game that has fizzled for this reason? So nine moons, I feel like fizzled because we had just a lot of breaks happening then, and I feel like it was like, okay, we're gonna take a break, we'll get back, and that one just never came back. Because I had some. I had more stuff planned. I had basically a gate that took you to 9 different moons, all with different environments, with different purposes. We did not get to all 9 of those moons, but it was at a time where there was like a lot of breaks happening, and maybe they just happened so close together that then I even began to lose momentum with it. The people, I think, began to lose momentum. We had some other people who were just kind of excited to do some other stuff. We got maybe planned some, I can't remember what we did next.
Yeah, that may have been like non-RPG stuff for a while at that point.
Like Sentinels and stuff for a while, and that was fine. The Sentinels card playing game, not the role playing game, and we had fun doing that other stuff. But it was so fun that I kind of lost the spark. So I've also been part of a campaign where actually been a part of a couple campaigns where it was very obvious that GM was just tired of running it. One, like everybody basically died. And the other one, like everybody's goals that had been happening just got all thwarted. Like the first one I jumped in on, you'd been playing forever. And it's just like, okay, this thing you've been spending 2 years collecting, this guy breaks them all over his knee, these tablets of power or whatever they were. And it just kind of all ended. It was pretty obvious that like the guy running it was like, I'm tired. I have no more. I've got nothing else in there. So I've seen those. The ones where players feel railroaded, maybe those have happened. I think I can remember one where I felt like, man, it just doesn't matter what I do. I feel like the DM here has a plan, and we're going to follow his plan no matter what. We're never gonna beat somebody we shouldn't have, and we're never not gonna beat somebody we should have. And so I remember one of those instances, and then. I think those ones with pacing issues have happened some, but probably that last one I said where people get tired of their characters, that's the one where the GM has less say, because I think people just get tired of playing it, and then they start bringing up other options, and maybe that's what happened with the 9 moons. I don't know, but when they start saying, "Hey, let's do this week. I'd like to do this week," it's a pretty good clue that something is not doing it for them. And so a lot of times when I have players who hate their characters, I'm going to do one of 2 things. I'm going to get with that character outside, or that player outside of the game, and say, hey, what can we do? What would make this more interesting for you? Because maybe they just haven't had any story And all they're doing is they're coming and they're rolling dice, but they're not a fighter. They're not doing much damage at all every time. They thought they were going to be stealth all the time, but there's never stealth. Or they are a healer. They thought that'd be awesome, but all they do is sit in the back and just heal people when people, request it. I need heal to heal bot. And then they don't feel like they get to do anything, make any choices. And so like I either have to find a way to give them a storyline that I can then weave in with everybody else's that they're interested in following.
Yeah, right.
To give them some agency, or sometimes it means like, what if there's a way that this character dies or leaves, and you get a character you really want to play? They started off not knowing anything. They chose this kind of character thinking it would be awesome. It's like, man, I saw the D&D movie and the druid was awesome. I chose druid.
Yeah,
it's just not at all what I thought it was going to be. I really want to be doing this. Okay, well, how do we get you into this person?
Yeah, right.
And so sometimes that's going to happen. But yeah, so in my games that I personally run, I think the 9 Moons probably ended because of just like too many cancellations and other things coming up in the middle. The Dormant Mind is one that's been on a hiatus for a long time, but I don't feel like that one has fizzled yet, but it could if I just continue to put it off. And that is basically on me right now. Everybody's ready for when I'm ready to come back. I just haven't felt in a place to do that. And so, I just talked a long time and I don't know if I made any sense. Or
I think so too. Yeah. From like a player standpoint, I feel those a lot. Like I think like burnout, I've definitely experienced as from like I'm a player in a campaign and it fizzles. Burnout, the like players getting disinterested for whatever reason. Like I've seen that happen. I've seen the lack of focus from the GM like once before, where that was like it just kind of fell apart because there was no, like we didn't know. It's like, where do you go, kind of thing with this.
Right.
And
what is there to do next?
It was like too open. And like some of that stuff, I think, I've seen that play out, and it is interesting because like there is I feel like everybody has responsibility, like that's the thing I think I'll hold to is like we're at the table. I do think there's something, I in my notes I had written like GM is glue, and I do think there's something about like, even it's like thinking more of like a leadership, like someone is saying we are driving, this is the way the bus is going kind of thing. That doesn't always work, but like it helps to keep things moving. I'm not just talking about story, but I'm just saying like as a group, we're going to show up every week and I'm going to have something to produce to like put in front of you, kind of thing. But I don't think it's solely GM, even though a lot of those are things that like we as GMs can like try to do better and help with. But like we all come to the table as a group working together to help these things move, communicating those things. And so kind of lost track of where I was going with that. But
I'm going to throw something in there real quick. This is something we didn't talk about in our reasons why things fizzle. Mm-hmm. You talked about like one person has to be kind of driving the bus, and it's not necessarily just meaning the story. I think this gets to logistics. You need to have somebody who's like sends out that text. Hey, are we all getting together this week? How y'all doing? Everybody feel good? People excited about Thursday? Because if somebody doesn't do that, it's going to just slowly fall apart. And that's like something we don't think about as part of the game, but it is important. That person who like kind of makes the logistics for making sure everybody's reached, also kind of inspires people. That's the whole leadership part of the GM. I think.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's really a good. It helps like bring energy to it, I think too. So yeah, that is a cool piece. Rob had mentioned clash of play style / kind of fun has been a problem for me, and that's for sure. Like I think that falls into kind of some of those expectation things, maybe of like everybody's bringing in different expectations for what this game is supposed to be, and sometimes that is I mean, we mentioned that with the or not, wasn't table tensions, but it was dealing with different play styles, right? At the very end, it was like, there may be a point where like this just isn't the right table, and that's like okay, it stinks, but like that's okay too if it's just like this is not the right fit kind of deal. But that definitely can put a hamper on a campaign and move it that direction if it's really a big problem for
And
people.
I think that probably is that clash of play style with the kind of fun can be something that happens between you and the GM. The GM is like, oh
Yeah,
man, I love rolling. You guys are going to roll like crazy.
yeah,
Whereas you're more into story stuff. That's a clash of play style and
right.
the kind of fun, right? But
Hmm.
that can also be just a clash in yourself, because let's not act like we always get it right. I was talking
Yeah,
about this, a player who creates a character they think is going to be fun, but it's totally not the kind of play style they like.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
being able to recognize that.
Right.
And so maybe Rob has had a situation in the past, or maybe some other people have, where, uh, well, I wanted to create a character. It was like this, but that's not the kind of it's not the
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of play
right.
I like to do. I'm going to pick the strong, silent, quiet fighter. Well, that's not the kind of style I play. I'm always
Right.
talkative, and I'm never just going to be the guy who's like,
Uh,
and so if I create that, my play style and my
yeah,
kind of fun are at odds, and sometimes that can
right.
happen internally with me as a player.
Yeah,
Sometimes it can
yeah,
happen between me and the GM. Sometimes it can happen between me and the other players. Lots of places for that to
yeah.
crop up. And the big thing is knowing how to recognize it in yourself as a player, but like as a GM, being able to recognize it in your players, to look at each one and say, are they
Mhm.
doing what they like? Are they having fun? Are they getting bored with their character? Um,
Yeah, yeah,
all that stuff.
yeah. I want to toss out some like ideas, maybe for like, or like things that I feel like I've learned through dealing with this or considering.
Hmm.
The like one, it's because it's personally for me what I feel like was the problem in that specific campaign was to have focus and direction as a GM. Like that just didn't. I need to go back and look at my notes, but I just know the way it ended. I didn't have like a next step in mind. Even if I had steps in mind prior to that of like, hey, this is kind of the arc that I'm hoping to go on to see where they go. I know at the end there was no like there was nothing in the front of people. So like
No
having
immediate
focus,
next
yeah, no
step.
immediate next step, and um or I think even mid distance next step, even in thought. So having focus and direction is super important to me in my games now. um I do think like holding things loosely is important with as a GM. And that's more of that, like we don't want to cram people into this is the way that it has to go. Because I would rather like I had this like huge idea for a campaign, and I thought they were going to be fighting Barrister, the death god, at the end, but they just really loved Boblin the Goblin, and that's like where the campaign went. And it's like, do I force them to fight Barrister because he suddenly kidnaps Boblin the Goblin, even though there was no reason for that, or like do I let it go and like come up with more ideas that can go into different places, um, and I think like being able to hold things loosely is like important. And that's like just, yeah, holding things loosely, I think is a piece there. Being okay with things fizzling if that's what's needed. Some of this stuff may just not, it just may not be the time. I think that is a, like, I think there's ways that we could probably, and I want to get into that eventually, like, is there a way to save this? But like sometimes it is just time, and it's okay if that's the way it goes. But I also think like encouraging multi GM seats at the table to spread the load around is like a super important part. And I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, Matthew, but like because of like needing creative space, say nobody else at the table GM'd ever at our table, like dormant mind maybe in a different place. If it was like, I need the space to like use my brain in other places,
Yeah.
that could look very differently,
It
kind of
probably
thing.
would have fizzled. I think I had written down here somewhere. I don't have my notes very organized, but this idea, especially with GM burnout, creator burnout, having multiple people willing to step into that role. First of all, I think the first guy that I talked about, I know I'm not naming names on here, but the first guy that burned out on us was merely because he was always the DM.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And
absolutely.
he never got to play. And like it made us at least realize some of us need to step up. And we now have several people at our table willing to step in and GM and some just starting to get to that place. And it makes a huge difference having those people so that there's not burnout. So if I'm starting to burn out, Adam can say, hey, I'm going to pick up this mini week thing, or I'm going to pick up something and go until you're ready, and we'll kind of play back and forth, and people can do that. And so I think that also helps with the idea of watch how often or how long you cancel for, because if you have other GMs, they can kind of step in. Hey, I'm going to run a 3-week thing where you're not feeling, but like if you just cancel a lot or a long time, what you're going to run into are people are going to find other obligations to fill that game night with. That game night's going to no longer be held sacred, which it kind of has to be in order to continue a campaign for a long time. Because let's face it, there's an investment of time, right? And if there's nothing else there, they're going to start to say, oh, me and my wife are going to do this on that night, or I'm going to start playing soccer on this night, or I'm going to start, whatever those things are. And they're going to, it's going to be a lot harder to ever get that started back up because everybody's going to have filled it with other obligations. So having another DM or GM in your group can keep that from becoming a problem, because when you're done and you can't, and you need to cancel for a while, somebody else can step in and kind of keep that night there.
Yeah. Starting to freak out, man. We're missing a bunch of October Thursdays.
We are. We're gonna have to make sure to get those, get all of this put in place.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have a comment here before we go on. Christopher Grant says, hey, Adam, I have trouble RPing different personalities. I've tried lawful good, but I always dip into chaotic neutral. I just wanted to read that because you are me. I have tried to think, okay, I'm going to play a lawful good person. And the truth is, at my core, I must just be chaotic neutral because that's what I play. Now, that's not so in my real life, but in my game life, I just cannot do the lawful good. And I've learned that as far as don't try. But we have someone with the opposite problem that's in our group who he almost always plays a lawful good, and he decided to try and play a chaotic neutral, or I forget what it was, Pip, that is doing in this. He tried to play somebody who was a little bit more evil, and he hated it. And it was like, he was just like not into the game at all. And that's when Adam, who's running the game, got with him and said, what can we do here? And there was an in-game thing that happened where he basically forsook. Forsaken. He forsook the guy, the one who was leading him, the evil
patron.
And there was like this, Selune, the goddess of the moon, whatever came, and she's a good person, and like gave him a redemption place, and he transformed his character into a person that he likes to play, that lawful good. It is important. Now, this is what I was talking about when you have that kind of internal clash between play style and kind of fun. I cannot play that lawful good guy who is like good no matter what, and I'll never, man, I need that chaotic nature. So I'm with you. I am with you, Christopher.
I think it's play. I don't know, play what you have fun playing, is like my thing. And for some people though, and I think it's, maybe this is the type of fun of challenge, even like, it's a different kind of challenge, but there may be a challenge where people have a lot of fun of like, I want to try to
Can
play
I?
something new. Kind of, can I do this? Can I play a game
This
of
is
that?
Adam, Mr. Completionist, who we played the Sentinels card game. And he's like, I have to play every single hero
Yeah.
because I want to have played them all.
Right.
Whereas like I never had that affliction. I'm like, I want to play these 5 that I like all the time. I'm just going to rotate between Setback and I can't even remember them now. I guess we haven't played in so long, but yeah, it's true that can be a kind of fun. But here's what you have to recognize is if you get in and it's not, find an escape hatch, find a transformation hatch of some sort with you and your GM.
Yeah. Something I wanted to toss out into that is, two things. One shots can be a better chance to, if that is a problem, but you want to play out these other things, like one shots are a really good place to be like,
great.
For this one session, I'm going to play and I'm going to do my best to like be something that I'm not typically, kind of deal. That's a good way to do classes too, that it's like, I never play a paladin. So I want to play a paladin and I'm going to play a lawful good one and I'm going to try this out. So that's like a good way to practice it. And on the other side, like I'm assuming that was from a character standpoint, PC kind of thing, the way that was written. But like, if that's from the GM side of things, I think like focusing in rather on like the, oh my goodness, I lost the word for it. Like
intersection.
I
can't tell what you're
chaos,
doing.
lawful, good, evil, like the alignment. Instead of focusing on alignment so much for maybe like NPCs that you're playing out, focusing more on like, okay, this is like their core motivation, or like this is a personality quirk, rather than trying to play out like what their alignment is. I think this was talking about a PC, but if it's an NPC kind of thing, I would encourage that as well. The train happening.
You've definitely got the trains today. That's not the first one you've had. The beautiful thing is every time you talk, it gets louder because your mic tries to gate when you're not talking. Christopher ask a second question. What's the best spacing for sessions? Once a week, twice a month, once a month? Here's what I'm going to say to that, and Adam can weigh in on this, but I think that depends on your people, right? So our people, we've said it once a week, but we had to kind of make sure that was okay with wives and with other people in our lives and jobs, and so we've worked that out to where everybody is okay with that being our one time every week, or at least my one time every week of getting together with guys and recognizing that aside from just loving gaming, it's also part of like what I need is friendships and guys that I know well and to have that. But that may not work for everyone. Once a week may be too much. And so you have to see what works with my party. But you also have to be careful if you have guys who like want to meet once a week, but you're only doing it once a month, they're going to fill in those obligations. So what I'm saying is I don't think there's an ideal for every group. I think there's an ideal for your group. And I think that's one of those session 0. What's our expectations? What do we want this to be? And there has to be kind of a commitment there. This is something too that's important. If you have somebody who loves gaming, but they can't commit, they can never, you just don't know if they're ever going to be there. You have to sometimes say, hey, you know what? If you ever get to a place where you have more free time, we'd love to have you in the game. But we need people who are going to be here every week or every other week. And if you can't be, let us know when you're available more, and we'll let you know. But until then, we're going to go. And that's a hard conversation to have because they're like, oh man, what are you doing? You're excluding me. But if they're not going, sometimes you have to decide this group of guys is going to make this commitment. And if everybody can't make that commitment, then maybe this isn't the game table for you right now, but maybe in the future it will be.
I echo all that. I am in the weekly game on Thursday nights. There's a group of us that play typically every other week unless something comes up. And then I'm in like a monthly game right now too. And sometimes all 3 of those things land on the same week and it gets a little nuts, but typically it's not that. but all of those are like working really well. And it just to echo what you just said, Matthew, like it's what the table needs, like what the group, that specific group needs. And all of them I think work well. Like none of them do I like jump in and I'm just like, oh, I have no idea what's going on, or, anything. It's able to be, and a lot of that's because, I mean, I'm running the one right now, the weekly, but like the other ones, it's the GM is doing a good job of there being touch points. So I think like touch points are important. Matthew brought up the person who like is like, hey, we're gaming this week, right? And that kind of stuff. Like, I think that's an important piece, especially the longer out we get. So if it's like a monthly game, that you have somebody who maybe, as the GM, maybe you're 2 weeks out, you're like, hey, looking forward to playing with y'all. Maybe be thinking about this kind of thing, and that kind of helps keep some mental energy alive in that too. But yeah, so what does your table need, and how's that going to work? And I think that's great no matter what. When we were looking at this like fizzled idea, Matthew, and if you got other thoughts you were going on before we went that direction, please jump in on that. But do you feel like there's ways that we haven't talked about, that it's like we see this kind of happening? How can we rescue? Like if like it's like feels like it's going a certain direction, maybe I'm feeling like, oh man, I think people are tapping out, or you see your GM tapping out, it's like, is there a way to step into that place and like not let this go into the junkyard that you've seen?
Well, I think it has to do with either recognizing it's okay to let this die, or if you don't want to let it die. So I do premarital counseling with people, and one of the things we talk about is when you get into an argument, how do you argue? Some people withdraw and get quiet, and some people like want to talk it all out, and that can be a problem if the person who wants to talk it all out is just like pushing the other person who needs to kind of get some space to even know what they think and feel. It can be a problem for them to come to a resolution. It just ends up in a big fight. But even if you go away, if you say, okay, I'm going to give you that space, it's not go away and then just let it die. You have to say, let's come back at this time. Well, okay, this is completely different than premarital counseling, but here in gaming, if you want to make it, if you want it to continue and you wanted to make it successful, but it's not working right now, sometimes you need to take a break from it. But you can't just say, we'll take a break and then leave it at that. You have to say, let's take a break and we'll come back to it at this point. Let's give 5 weeks. Let's play just board games for 3 weeks and then start this again. Those sorts of things can help rescue one that's down. The other thing is to take a good look at, as a GM, am I pacing it right? Am I making sure that everybody's not bored with their characters? And if they are, am I making sure to find new ways to hook them in, to weave these stories together, and that's all the conversations we've had in all these episodes before, and we'll continue to have ways that you can, as a GM, kind of get better. But sometimes a game is like the people just aren't going to commit to it, or there's just too many things going on in their lives, and you have to say, this one's going to end. But that's not, how do you bring this to a successful conclusion? Did you have some thoughts on that?
Honestly, not necessarily, other than the things that kind of been, we kind of said some of these deals. Like I do think, like, what I've seen, in our experience, what I've felt like did work well on the GM side of thing was to just have the ability, the culture of like, we want as many people to be able to GM at the table, and that there's like room for that. So when we have a thing where it's like, I just need a break, and it's not just like a week break. It's like, I need a month or two for whatever reason, or longer, somebody else could step in. And if we were like, we really want to keep doing RPGs, then they can step in and GM things, to have that space for like just a palate cleanse of, we're gonna play Risk. I don't know, like, or like Sentinels of the Multiverse,
I love
or
Risk, by the
poker,
way.
like,
And poker.
kind of thing. Like all those things, just something, because like, and again, that may be unique to us, but a huge part of our regular game night is, and I don't know, I would even say, as I'm on a RPG podcast, it's less about the RPG and more about the gathering. Like,
Right.
that's how, at least that's how I'm looking at it. It's like, we could get together and play something that's not a TTRPG, and we would love being together, kind of thing. We just so happen to enjoy RPGs too, and that's a big focus right now. But
This is the
yeah,
one, not the one time, but this is a time where I'll say there's probably lots of podcasts out there, and it doesn't hurt to like find one, maybe people who are very dedicated to RPGs, but not to a group of friends. They love getting into games, because right now you're getting a very slanted view of two guys who
right.
we're part of a group that it's as much that community as it is that game, and that community goes beyond the game for us. And so that's going to make things look a little different when we talk versus somebody who's like, hey, I jump in at conventions, and then I'll go jump in a game with people I don't know here. And I'm all about just like the gaming. That's going to be a little bit different slant.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And all those things are great too. It's just like you said, it's the slant that we tend to towards. So, having said all that, like, so that's the thing where it's like, I think if it's about the group, and like I'm seeing, and we're losing a little steam here. What I would want to do is come to a place of like, this isn't the bow, that we put on it, but it's like the end of an arc or the end of a adventure, at least, where it's like there was some satisfaction of, we were able to secure the lair of the dragon and wipe out those orcs and save the village, and everything's safe, and we're going to go back, and then we're going to, hey, so the next 4 weeks we're actually going to take a break, and we're going to play whatever board games we want to bring together, and just like have that, to be able to maybe have some GM recovery where it's like, man, I'm tapped on ideas, but I can take a month and think, and then maybe be able to bring something important back. It's something interesting back, I guess, is the very important. But that's how I would kind of look at that. And if it was a GM kind of burnout situation, but yeah, I think we named off a lot of stuff that I would do already. So yeah.
All right. Well, guys, I think the whole idea of games fizzling is something that will happen. You will come up against it. No ways that you can, tactics that you can use to like kind of keep the energy in it, to think about how to increase your pace, fix your pacing, fix your ideas, whatever. But also know that sometimes that kind of time comes for demise. And when it does, that doesn't mean it has to be the end of your playing together, your community, your RPG, all of that. Yeah. Hey, let's jump to our NPC and then see if we have anything in the mailbag today. The NPC today, again, we, at the beginning of every episode, if you're first time on here, we have a kind of an encounter hook that we like to throw out there for people. Here, at the end, we like to throw out an NPC just so you have people floating around in your head. Hey, that's kind of a character I might use in my game just as an NPC to help things along. This one is Thaddeus Carter. And Thaddeus Carter's a stout and fat person from years of sitting on his cart. He's has a deeply lined face that shows that he's outside a lot. He lives outdoors, right? His expression of resignation rarely changes. Thaddeus is fond of pointing out that things can always get worse. He approaches every situation with this dogged acceptance. It's like, okay, here comes. Thaddeus views the world as part of a vast conspiracy to make him miserable, and has for years, right? Though he grumbles often, he is patient. He's an honest man who tries to do his best and who makes the best of whatever is thrown at him, whatever that is. Secretly, Thaddeus is convinced that his bad luck is the result of a magical curse. that happen to him, right? He soldiers on because he's certain that someday he's going to find somebody who can identify that curse and break it. That's kind of his deep underlying motivation in life. His ill fortune started when his parents named him. They named him Thaddeus, after all, and it hasn't let up since. Thaddeus has never missed a day of work, despite frequent potential excuses, right? He's had illness, there's been bad weather, broken wheels, lame horses, traitorous guards, just plain bad luck, all of these things, right? If it's regrettable, it's happened to him. Thaddeus is one of those characters that can add color and excitement to a caravan-based adventure. If you have one of those, he can be used as the perfect cover for transporting something important, because who would ever suspect that someone in their right mind would entrust a big, valuable thing to this guy? And he's always like, oh, the rain I could live with, I guess, but this hail, that's uncalled for. And now look up there. There's brigands up there, of course. You know, I picture this guy when I think of him as like Eeyore. You know, Eeyore
Yes,
from the Winnie the Pooh stuff. It's like, oh, wouldn't you know it? This has happened now. Oh, well, you know, it's like, that's this guy. That's Thaddeus. He knows everything bad's going to happen. He expects it, doom and gloom, but what else would you expect? And here we go. What do you think of Thaddeus, Adam?
I'm trying to figure out. So yes, Eeyore for sure. Christopher asked, "Is it Thaddeus with a PH?" And I'm trying to figure out if
it is not. It's like PH. Fattias. Thaddeus. His parents named him Thaddeus, of course. Thaddeus Carter.
The like PH fat. Anyway,
Coolius.
the
Thaddeus.
Yeah, Eeyore was definitely who I was like imagining. Or if you happen to be a C.S. Lewis Silver Chair fan, there's a guy named Puddleglum that's a main character in that who is amazing. But that's him. Like, that is him. It's like everything. It's, you know, he's supposed to be the chipper, the more chipper and excitable Marshwiggle. Is what their race is. And but he's like always just, it's always the dour side of things. And it's like, it's raining now, but it's probably going to be ice and snow tomorrow, you know, kind of thing. And yeah, I definitely would want to channel those kind of things if you were playing him. But I question, and I had like, do you think it's more interesting with this guy if it actually is a curse or if it's not? Like what's more intriguing? It's a little more funny to me if it's not.
I think it's great that he thinks it's a curse.
Yeah.
And like maybe even like says that occasionally or all the time. But then like if they stick with this character long enough. So this is an NPC. The beautiful thing about NPCs, sometimes they can come into your campaign for just like an episode or two. Like this is a show. For a session or two. And then you never see them again. Or they can kind of recur, or they can be there a lot. And if he ends up being somebody who is recurring or there a lot, maybe toward the end, as people just are hearing this over and over again, to find out that no, it was actually true. This was a curse, you know. But that's one of those things that it depends on how your characters respond to him, whether I would like bring him in as a big enough part to actually make it a true curse, or if I would just always let it be like he just thought there was a curse.
Yeah. Totally different take that I just thought of as you were talking. Like, what if this was just like a cover for like a god? You know, it's like you like this, like it's like totally spinning it on its head, but like, you know, or it's like, you know, a fae, like an archfey who this is the only, you always have this like encounter with them of this just dour, like guy who's just annoying to them. And like, just, you're like, feel sorry for maybe or whatever, but it's actually like, you know, some cover. I think that could be like a funny, like take at the end of them realizing, oh, this is, you know, kind of, I don't know. I like humble, I don't know, that kind of like people in disguise, you know, in humble circumstances kind of thing. And that could be a funny way to play him too. But definitely flavor, like it says, could be a fun flavor piece to just, they encounter, get to kind of enjoy those conversations and then move on. So
yeah, Thaddeus Carter.
Yep.
Throw him in. See if he fits in your campaign somewhere.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the mailbag, the haversack. See if there's anything in there.
We have a few in the haversack today. Feel free at any time if you're listening or watching. We are risethegm@gmail.com, and you can send in stuff to the haversack.
I like this thing Christopher just said. It's a God who gains power the more you pity him. So like instead of a faith, like making him powerful, it's pity makes him powerful. So the more you pity, the more, yeah, it's good stuff.
And Evan said the anti-Tom Bombadil is a neat idea for a magical entity. Yes. Yeah. That's awesome. I love it. You
all right, onto the haversack.
Yeah, onto the haversack. So we've got one, Cole Anderson, which I think is the first time Cole's written in. He wrote episode 52 play styles is the name of this letter. And I've met Cole before. So he said, "Hey Adam, this is Evan's friend Cole. We met at Gen Con and played together a couple times. I made a Pathfinder 2 a second edition cameo in a game that they were playing in, and then we did a game called Microscope, which I'd love to talk about sometime on the podcast." And he says, "I was listening to your Playstyles episode and was reminded of the book Robin's Laws of Good Game Mastering," which I'm going to link in our socials this week. It's a great system neutral resource that covers a lot of ground in just 33 pages. One of the first things he does in the book is define 7 player types and the things that interest those archetypes in the game. I thought this was like super interesting. You have power gamer, tactician, method actor, casual gamer, butt kicker, specialist, and storyteller as these like archetypes. He said, "I think you and Matthew covered most of them. Maybe not the specialists, the person who wants to play the same character type no matter the game, i.e. the ninja or the drow ranger, or tactician, the person whose ideal session is hours of planning to try and totally neutralize the scenario with as little cost to the party as possible. According to the book, the specialist is primarily looking for opportunities for their preferred character type to do the things it's good at, and the tactician needs obstacles that allow them to flex the planning muscle." The author, Robin Laws, also has another good book called Hamlet's Hit Points that talks about managing a game's narrative feel by thinking about the story beats and their ups and downs. And we have the link here also that I'm going to link in our socials. But said, "Enjoy the podcast. Keep up the good work." Enjoying the podcast. Keep up the good work. Thanks, Cole. So I thought that was really cool. I'm really interested in digging into those archetypes more. I think that's like a really cool list to work through.
Yeah. Yeah. And that encounter we had at the beginning of this, where you have all the watchers on the hills that are very separate, but they can still, that's that tactician. They want to plan. How do we do this so that like when we go to do it, everything is neutralized.
Yep.
That's perfect for someone who is a tactician type player.
Yeah. It's really cool. So I appreciate that, Cole. Thanks for sending that in. And then we've got a haversack message from Evan Bright. Haversack questions batch 2024 916. So these came in a while ago. It's got 3 questions here. Which roles do you tend to keep behind the screen or otherwise out of player's sight?
Well, okay. So there's probably, as I think about this, there might be more, but I know that when I first bring them up against a creature, a monster, a character, whatever, when the battle breaks out, I like to keep stuff behind the screen because my players are adept at watching the number and then figuring out exactly what they have to get to hit. And I like them at first to not know. Now, once they, because, when I roll, they're going to see, oh, this is what he rolled and this is how it hit me. So at first they don't know how powerful is this thing, but once they start to figure it out, or especially if it comes to like, hey, this roll is going to mean everything, I'll roll that out in front so they can just see it happen. Or if I want them to know that, like, man, I'm not trying to screw you guys. I'm not against you here.
Right.
I will roll that in front. But often the other kinds of rolls I like to roll behind are the ones that don't even matter at all, but make people nervous, right? It's like you're walking along. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, keep going. And they're like, what just happened? And they get all nervous. Well, maybe that roll didn't mean anything, but you roll that behind the screen so that they're like not sure, what's going on. So those are a couple of the ones that I definitely like to roll behind the screen. Also, if I'm trying to think of sometimes with saves, like they'll roll something and it's like, I need a wisdom save. But this is a pretty important story point, and I have to like decide if this fails, does this ruin everything? I might roll that behind the screen just in case, because sometimes, again, I don't often fudge rolls, but if it's in, making the story so that it like doesn't fall apart completely, I may from time to time.
Yeah.
But then most of the time, I'm going to roll those saves out front because I want them to see that, like, hey, what you did. Now, this doesn't mean that if I roll it behind the screen, I'm automatically fudging. If I roll it, I'm automatically honest. I don't want that to ever be the case either. But.
Yeah. I think like that watching out for like people gauging, okay, this exact thing, and he rolled a 15, but if I add whatever kind of defensive thing I can do, then it like blocks it, and I think there is something about like as the battle goes on, that being more free because you're like feeling out. It's like almost like in this real fight that's been 18 seconds long, like I figured out finally my opponent a little more, and so it can be a little more out there, but I think keeping that tight right away. I tend to like do that with saves. I think again, just kind of keeping some mystery about that. But I don't typically like, so when we're online, everything's out there. I don't typically click it's always an accident if it's been like clicked to the GMs only kind of thing. So like we're on Roll20, everybody's seeing that. And I think that's like opened me up a little more to like, I'm just going to roll out front, but I do some of those. If I'm like, well, random encounter, is something happening specifically at this watch? No, it's going to be the next one, or figuring out like at which watch is it going to happen. I don't want that to just be out in the middle of, sometimes it's like, if there's a person watching who no one's thinking they're watching, I'm going to make some perception rolls, and I'm going to do that over here again, because I'm not just going to say, well, the dude in the alleyway is watching you. No, he doesn't see anything. Like I want to know and let some of those things be variable. So that's kind of the stuff that I guess comes for me about like hidden roles. But most of my roles are out in the open at this point in my career. So second question, what portion of an RPG's rules, if any, do you expect your players to have read?
So this one's tough because we play with the same guys a lot, and typically by the time people have been gaming a lot, they know most of the rules, probably better than I do. But so like when we brought in a whole bunch of new people at once, we tried to give them like a little bit of a crash course in, hey, this is the way the game goes. And then we would stop whenever something would happen, like in the game for the first time, we would kind of read that rule there together so that everybody understood how it happened. We would bring up, hey, if you're trying to do a spell, but you have to concentrate on it and somebody hits you, here's how this is figured out, and then we show them. So I've never had the case where I'm like, man, my players just need to read the rules. I've never had a problem like just saying, let's check that out right now. Somebody pull that up and read that for me.
Right.
That kind of thing. So I don't know that I would ever have fallen into the camp of, well, I expect everybody to know all of these rules and read them. Most people kind of want to know anyway, at least that I've played with. Yeah. And so they check it out. I don't know.
Yeah.
Adam?
Yeah. From a legitimate expectation, what pertains to your character, that's what I want them to know,
right.
kind of thing.
Like if they're like, I cast sleep, I would expect them to kind of know, how does sleep work?
How does it work? Yeah. So spells, your combat maneuvers, just like, what does it mean to have dark vision? Like that kind of, that's important to me. I really want them to know their character. I do think like, because it's the most, well, typically the most crunchy in my opinion, like the combat aspect, like it would be super nice for them to understand at least the things happening in combat that they typically do, kind of deal. And but like some of that's like worked through in the process. And like Matthew, you mentioned like let's open, or let's flip the book open and read. Like I've talked about doing that with spells before, where it's like, okay, you're casting this spell that's not typically used. It's not just like magic missile. Okay, it hits 1d4 plus 1, like kind of thing. Like it's like, okay, this specific spell that I haven't really seen a lot, let's flip that open and like understand it together as a table.
Right.
So that happens a lot, I think, like learning in the moment. I definitely would say though, like it's not an expectation for me, but like I would recommend to anybody who's a player out there, like worth reading the player's handbook, or like if it's one of those, if it's a RPG that has like a core rule book, the player's section of it, like what you need to know. You don't need to get into the GM stuff necessarily, but I think that's like well worth it to have a better understanding of like how things flow together. But do you need to read like every table of every like item possible in the game? I don't think so, kind of thing. I think we can flip open and use that as a resource instead. So that's my thoughts. I think specifically, I want you to know what's to do with your character, and the other stuff we can figure out as it goes.
Yeah.
So, any other thoughts on that, Matthew?
I guess I would just say, if you have people who love rules in your group, and they can tactfully kind of like bring that stuff up at the table, like if you're misusing it, or if some other player, or just ask the question, wait, how long does that last again?
Yeah.
Is that a concentration spell? Are you sure that happens to
Right. Yeah.
just foes, or does that happen to everybody in that area? You can ask those kinds of questions, and then they have to like look. It would probably be more important if like nobody knew. If you're all new, GM and players alike are all new to kind of this role-playing game or this system, then it'd probably do for everybody to kind of read the rules more. As it is with us, we have enough people who know the rules kind of that they can bring that stuff up.
Yeah. This is like not really this question, but something that I saw done by Sam Grant, Christopher, who was talking earlier, his brother, who also has come on and talk about Fallout and the Sentinels RPG. So Sam, we had a session that was specifically going to be out in the water, and he knew there's a very likely that there's going to be combat in the water kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a GM, when we showed up that night, he had printed out little sheets for everybody that was like a guide to underwater combat. And it was like a bookmark that basically had, both sides, but it was explaining, here's the things that are important for that. And he may have found that somewhere. He may have made it. I don't know. But that was like super cool. And I was like, man, I need to think about, if I'm pretty positive that this like kind of awkward, different kind of thing is going to happen tonight, maybe that's like worthwhile of having that. Because I really appreciated, like, I don't have to go flipping through things to like figure out, it's like right here. So not necessarily that, but I think if there's like special rules that may be coming, there's some like GM help that can be given in that way too.
Okay.
The third question was, how has your GMing style evolved over the years? He said, can be like improvements or neutral shifts, like change in preferred campaign themes or improv level, those kind of things.
I think my biggest change, if I look back to when I first started to now, is realizing that it's okay to have repeat creatures. So when I first did it, every campaign, I just had to find a new, and there was never a repeat. Well, that's hard for people who pick favorite enemies, or for like a kind of a storyline to go along where there are, you think about, if the orcs are invading, you're going to have orcs a lot. And then if you every single time you're just picking the next big monster in your monster manual that fits in this environment type, which is something I'm very guilty of. I love new monsters, and I love, specific to environment types and all that kind of stuff. But I've learned to kind of use repeat monsters, but give them character that is different. They have different motivations, different habits, and the way they talk and what they do. And everything, but like that's one of the biggest things that's changed for me over the years, I would say.
Yeah. I've talked about it before, but definitely going from like a manuscript to working in smaller, like more like here's the high points, and I'm gonna work from like motivations and work from current events. I don't have to know every single thing that they're gonna say ever in a conversation or something like that. So that's been a big deal from the start to now.
And in that vein, the advent of technology. So when we first started, you had a book. And so you're going down the road, you're going to meet this Etten, and then you're going to go to this castle that has traps. And I had to plan all that stuff out and have stat blocks printed out or have them, bookmarked or whatever. And that was like something. Now I can put all those things into one document or into an app or something like that, which really helps. But like, it also helps me to be more loose and free with the game. So as players are like, I run over here and do this, and I think, oh, this would be a great place for this monster. I need I can even like pull stuff up on the fly, adjust it on the fly, and make it happen. That's stuff I couldn't do so easily before. So that has been evolved, just the way I use technology. And it's not just with the monsters, but it's like everything. To like Adam said, when we first started playing, if people weren't able to be in the same city, then we weren't playing. But now, obviously, with the internet and with the pandemic giving everybody Zoom, it's super easy. And then Roll20 kind of came along. That wasn't there when we started.
Yeah. In that kind of vein too, like, or semi in that vein, I think a change that happened for me is back when I first started, if a player couldn't be there, I was like, all right, we can't play, kind of thing. And that's definitely shifted for me, where I'm like willing. I mean, I was willing, even like tonight with several missing players, to be like, hey, we could go ahead and do something related. We'll continue to play. And I think probably was wise to go ahead and just say, no, we're not going to do this. But I think we all could use the time too. But that's something that like I never would have done or even considered if one person was out, kind of thing. And for better or worse, I'm more willing with my games, at least, like to say, like, okay, somebody's out tonight, but we're going to continue moving forward and we'll just catch them up, next time, kind of deal. So I don't know that that's a better way of doing things by any means, but that's definitely a shift I've had just at the table, kind of deal. Yeah. All
right. Well, we have one more comment came in here. It says, my world I've created, I've placed all my races and monsters in places already based on terrain, but repeat is an issue for me too, or non-exotic. Yeah, especially when I want to use my 5 monster manuals. I feel the pain the same way. I think that's probably a pretty normal GM thing. You love newness, uniqueness. So
for sure. I hadn't seen Rob's either. It says to confirm Hamlet's hit points is good. So we got a firsthand account there. Have to check those books out here. That's cool. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for us here today on Rise of the GM. Don't forget, next time we have a special guest, right, Adam?
Yep. Super excited. Nicole from Game Master Mom is going to be on. We're going to talk about playing with kids, playing RPGs with kids. So,
And as more and more of us become dads, if you're not a dad yet, you may be someday. And if you do, or even if you have just nieces and nephews, good thing to think about. How do you do this with kids? So we'll be talking about that and more next time on Rise of the GM. Thank you guys for joining us today about the Fizzle.
The Fizzle.
We'll see you then. Bye, everybody.
See you.